What we're going to talk about today is the return on investment of configure, price, quote solutions. And if you're not even sure what those are, we'll certainly talk a little bit about that as well. And then we're going to kind of break it down into its core business value areas, talk about what those values are, and even give you a little very unsophisticated Excel tool, if you want to download it, that you might be able to do some of your own ROI calculations with. Throughout the session today, I certainly invite you to ask questions. Probably the best way to do that is to put them into the chat window. My partner in crime, Elizabeth, with Cincom is here today. She'll be monitoring those. She'll probably hold most of them to the end. But if some of them look really, really relevant to a slide or a burning issue, she may jump in and chat with me a little bit about those. So put them right in there. I think we'll have time for almost everything today. If you prefer to share your question anonymously, you can share it just with the panelists or just Elizabeth or just I. We won't call your name out when we share the question. If you prefer to keep that private, that's perfectly fine. And I hope you enjoy what we have to talk to you about today. So jumping into our discussion just a little bit, let's make a couple of introductions here. My name is Jeff Abels. I've probably met some of you before. I see at least one client on the line right now, so I'm very happy to have you here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeff Abels. I've run a business called C5 Insight literally for 20 years. We just celebrated our 20th birthday in Charleston, South Carolina about 2 months ago. The whole company went down there, and I had a fun time celebrating and had a fun time kind of envisioning maybe what the next 20 might look like for our organization. So we really enjoy each other. We have a very unique culture. And what we do is we implement solutions around customer and employee digital experience. So when it gets down to solutions, that tends to be things like Dynamics 365, SharePoint, Teams, and the Power Platform. But really a significant part of what we do is help with business planning, business process design, project planning, a lot of things that aren't necessarily hands-on doing cool stuff with technology, which we love to do, but has more to do with what I'm going to talk to you about today, and that is what really is the business value of what we're trying to do here, and how do we transform the way people behave and the way the business works to improve the bottom line, improve the top line, and improve the quality of service both our customers and employees are experiencing. So that's us in a nutshell. And to be totally transparent with you, I really geek out on this. I've been doing it for more than 20 years. People probably rightly sometimes accuse me of being a bit of a workaholic, and I don't say that braggadociously. It's a problem that I sometimes need to deal with. But part of the reason why is because it's kind of my hobby too, right? So I've written books on this. I've co-authored books on this. I've helped contribute to inspiring some other folks to write books on the topic. I've been recognized by Microsoft recently as an MVP, which is their term for most valued professional, which essentially means I've done a lot of work giving back to the community, trying to help people understand what this is all about. And my work tends to focus not so much on the hands-on how-to. Some of my colleagues do that. My work tends to focus on the business value and what leaders can get out of these and what they might need to be thinking about that they might not be aware of. So that's my business story, but here's my why. Here's the people that kind of give me such motivation to get up every morning and be excited about what I do, and that's my family. My wife and I are empty nesters. If you're not there yet, I highly recommend that stage. It's fantastic. We love it. We enjoy a lot of time with each other. We're motorcycle and fine spirits hobbyists, so you see us there in a couple of those pictures, enjoying some of those things together. We're somewhat recent grandparents. Our grandson Theo just had his 2nd birthday, and we just found out we're going to be grandparents for a 2nd time with a granddaughter scheduled to arrive in November. So that's very exciting for us as well. So I know some of that's very personal, but I think it's nice to help to get to know me a little bit better. And I wish I had time to ask everybody to introduce themselves the same way. But if you'd like to share something in chat about a link to your LinkedIn profile or a vacation idea you have this summer, love to hear those things and love to be able to give other attendees the ability to see that as well. Elizabeth, I don't want to catch you off guard, but do you want to chime in real quick and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Burkhead, and I am responsible for channel marketing here at Cincom. And I basically work with Jeff and C5 in partnership to bring value to our joint customers. And we're just really glad to have you here. We are happy to be a co-sponsor of this webinar, and I hope you get value out of it. So thank you so much for joining.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. And so Elizabeth may interrupt me and ask questions. This may be somewhat conversational. I may just go through straight through the slides, and we may just do the questions afterwards. We're just going to kind of go with the flow and see how it works out. So with that said, it's not a long presentation today. We might have plenty of time for Q&A, and I might even give you a bit of time back. So when you think about CPQ, if you're not sure what CPQ is or what the impact is, it's really across three core dimensions. So let's cover those briefly and then dive into each in a little more detail. The first dimension is just productivity, right? That's probably the most obvious benefit for an investment in a configure price quote solution, because what they do essentially is help the sales team configure the things you offer, price them accurately, and provide quotes to customers. There's a lot more to them than that. They usually have a lot of other sophisticated pieces, but sort of like CRM is a lot more than just C&R and M. CPQ is a lot more than just C&P and Q, but that kind of covers the high level vision of what these solutions do. So they make your sales resources work more effectively, right? They can create those quotes more rapidly than they used to be able to create them before. So it's going to produce quotes. We're going to produce quotes a lot faster, particularly if your quotes require expertise to assemble, right? You're not just adding items to a list, but you actually have to make sure that items work well with each other and follow certain rules and that kind of thing. Another area of impact is quality overall. So generally, if you have complex products to quote, you have potential quality issues with those quotes, where if you don't have the right expertise and at the right time with the right amount of time focused on producing those quotes, your quotes may not meet quality standards. And more errors creates a lot of problems. It might even create cost issues where you may have to deliver on what you quoted, even though what you quoted may not have been what you actually have to provide to the client, if you don't want to miss their expectations by having to go back and change your quote amount after the fact. And the last one, which I think is really the most subtle, is it creates perceived expertise, right? So your sales reps oftentimes, in most organizations, oftentimes have to go back and go, look, to get you a quote, I need to get an engineer involved and other experts involved to pull this out. And in today's day and age, a lot of end customers think you're not adding value, right? If you're just a go-between to talk to me but get experts involved every time I have a technical question or need a quote, why don't I just talk directly to those people? And that may not be practical for you to provide, but that might be the expectation customers are having more and more. So positioning your salespeople to have more expertise in the face of the client can play a really important role, not only in their personal branding, which helps your branding, but also in utilizing and consuming the time of those deep expert resources that probably need to be really deeply engaged operationally in getting other things done for the business. So those are our three main things. Now let's talk about the details of the return on investment for each one of those. I hit you at a high level with them. What are the other components of the return on investment? So when we talk about productivity, first of all, faster bids don't just mean less time that your reps are spending, but it also means you're going to be the fastest to bid. And sometimes the fastest to bid is going to have the higher win rate, right? If you can respond to that particularly urgent client need for a quote faster than a competitor can, even if you're the second person they asked, if you're getting back to them with a quote faster, you very may be the one to win. You might even win before a competitive bid even gets submitted. But oftentimes, even if you aren't the only bid, if the customer or prospect understands that you're responding more quickly to me, they're willing to give some back in terms of maybe some higher margin to you because of your perceived higher quality, higher speed that you're providing that at. So certainly not only are you winning faster and winning more deals, but you're potentially even improving your margins on those deals. And I don't mean by 20 or 30%, but maybe by a few percentage points. And as we all know, we're in a percentage game with that. Every little bit we can do to create more value for the customer and create more repeat business and value for us might actually add to our margins and longer term, happier customers, repeat customers, larger margins. And then the other part that's a little more obvious with that is less time per deal per rep means more times your reps actually spend doing their core job, right? Building more relationships, doing those things that only humans can do that you need them to do. You've you spend a lot of time and money recruiting and training them to have that really unique skill set. And the more you can unleash them to do that, the more they're actually going to go add new things to the pipeline that they're then going to be able to bid faster, and it becomes a very virtuous process at that point. So more time for sales reps to do what they want to do. There's some hidden benefits when we look at this too, and I'll talk more about subjective, but I can tell you from all my experience working with hundreds of sales reps across a lot of different industries, the more sales reps are unleashed to do what they want to do, the happier they are as an employee, the longer they tend to last, and the better returns the organization tends to get on them. So just the psychological, cultural change is also a somewhat subjective, but a real benefit as well. Moving into the second one, what about quality? How can we quantify the return on investment for better quality in our quotes? So one certainly is better margins overall. And generally that means that's because we're not going back and fixing stuff and then feeling like we need to give back to the customer, right? I can't tell you how many times we've done complex process models to understand selling processes and realize that mistakes are made somehow in the complex quoting process. And when those mistakes are made and that gets all the way to the customer, particularly if the customer even approves it, and then after the fact, the organization figures out, wait a minute, we forgot a key element that also has to be part of the solution, whether it was a services element or a product element or a configuration element, whatever it was, if it's adding cost and you now need to regain that cost, you are not going to regain that cost at the same margin you would have had you had that in your front end accurate quote to begin with. So you're going to have better margins if you're not making as many mistakes. You're also going to have fewer compliance mistakes potentially. So depending on your industry and your organizational model, if you're making mistakes, there could actually be compliance issues related to those mistakes. Those can result in things like security issues for your customers. They could wind up in potential even lawsuits for your organization if you're not careful. So that's going to have a cost lowering impact. And improved design, of course, within your quotes, higher quality is going to mean more wins and again, higher margins, right? You're getting back to your customer not only faster, but with a higher quality quote. And the reality is probably many of our customers try different providers, try different ones of your competitors over time. And the more they come back to you and realize, hey, you know what, every time they get the quote right, every time they're pretty fast at responding to me, they start to come back to you more and more to say, you know, those other guys, they undercut you, but you know, I got 6 months into the project and I realized they undercut you because they were inaccurate. Whether that was intentional or unintentional doesn't really matter. They're going to come back to you when they realize I get no surprises in my quotes when I work with your company. And they don't need to know the behind the scenes because you've invested in a configure price quote solution and process. So again, that kind of relates to that last one. A higher quality experience for your customer is going to equal more repeat business for you as an organization. In fact, my model isn't this detailed, but that gets to actually an old type of profitability model I used to run in a previous life where we would look at a customer loyalty model and it would combine a lot of things, but one of those would be a repeat business. And I can tell you a small incremental change in the under percent range. And that doesn't mean 10% more than what you're getting now. It means a small percentage difference. So if you have 30% repeat customers now, and you move that from 30% to 32%, so that's almost a 10% change, right? 2 percentage points, but it's a 10% change on where you are right now. That is a tremendous change in your bottom line revenue, top line revenue and bottom line margins, because that little bit of business is recurring. It's going on and on and on, and it continues to add up, right? It's like earning compounding interest on money in an investment because you're continuing to add new customers to that model. They're continuing to recur with you, and it has an exponential effect over the long term. And then the third wheel of this is the idea of expertise. So expertise is there's a reality and there's a perception. One of my old bosses and mentors used to always say, perception is reality. The reality is your frontline reps are probably never going to be the detailed level of product, engineering, whatever it is that you're in the business of, that your back-end people are, right? The people have to implement the solution, people have to configure it manually and all of those kinds of things. That's the reality. The perception, however, for most reps and most organizations these days is they're really just an account manager. They show up with a blank sheet of paper and say, what do you need? And they try to take notes, and then they go back and talk to experts to try to then give me something that I need. Maybe they bring the experts back to talk to me. There is a very low perceived expertise value in the typical sales rep these days. The higher you can get that expertise perception, the better. And part of that is training and actually aligning reality to perception as much as possible. But understanding the reality is never going to live up to what you need it to. So you need to close the gap between reality and perception by improving perception as well. And a CPQ solution can start to say, look, an enormous part of our business is really based at its core around a set of rules. It might be a very elaborate, complex set of rules that takes some time to model, but it really is based on a set of rules. And if we can take that human capital that understands those rules, that has that institutional knowledge, and we can encapsulate that in a set of rules that can be rolled out in a configure price quote solution, now instead of sales rep Jeff having to talk to 3 experts to put a quote together, sales rep Jeff can just have the right questions in front of him to ask the customer about their requirements and can get an initial quote to the customer potentially in minutes. Maybe you'll have an internal validation step or two to make sure it's accurate before it can go to them, but even that is significantly accelerated and can usually have a front-end conversation that turns a rep into an active consultant and a rapid responder to the customer, raising that perceived expertise level of the rep as a valuable part of the buying process for the customer. And less experience required by your reps also means you can find reps faster, your cost of getting reps is reduced, and your ability to train reps and ramp them up to speed is faster than it used to be before. I'm not saying that we're making this so automatic that you can hire otherwise ignorant reps and make them look like experts. This is not a replacement for training. It is not a replacement for working on expertise status for your reps, but it is something that a lot of reps need because it's just not practically possible for them to have a detailed enough knowledge of the full range of your solutions to actually be the engineer to do the configuration. That is the rare rep, but it is possible to say, I can get them, I can move the reality and I can move the perception and I can create more knowledgeable reps faster and I can create reps that have even more perceived knowledge than they actually do. And that is a winning formula for winning more deals. So that was a lot of quantitative ROI, a little bit of qualitative ROI while we're on the subject though. Part of this is as you unleash your people, both front end and back end. Remember, one of the things we didn't really talk too much about is that expertise means less pressure on your back end resources to be involved in the sales process. Well, when there's less pressure on them to be involved in that, all of a sudden you've started to unleash them to do what they're best at, which usually has a lot to do with innovation and customer service and those kinds of things. So again, you're creating a better culture for your people to do the things that only people can do by investing in this. More repeat business, of course, we talked about, not always easy to quantify, but an incredibly important thing. More time for your reps to be selling and improved loyalty for your customers overall. And then there's the quantifiable things that we already talked about, which I'll give you a spreadsheet for in a minute. But that is very simply and easier to calculate. An improved win rate will probably win more deals, deal over deal. Higher margins will probably get a better return on each one of those deals over time. And time savings and therefore lower cost in producing those deals. So we can drive cost out of the system, whether it's risk cost, compliant cost, giving up on margin because we're fixing errors, or the cost of hiring more reps because we have to fill a vacuum that is created because our reps are too busy doing things that are not aligned with their core skill set. So over time, this is not a business case to say reduce our sales team, but it is a business case to say we will not need to expand it as rapidly, and when we do, we're going to be able to do that more cost effectively than we otherwise could. So with all that said, hopefully you can read this, but this is the resource I will give you afterwards if you're interested. It's already available for download on our website, but our website's in the middle of a revamp, and I know it's a little bit of a labyrinth to go find this stuff, so I'll give you my contact info and you can grab this from me if you want it. But this is a CPQ ROI calculator with just 3 scenarios built into it. Now you can do multiple lines on this, or you can just do one that takes all of these into account. Every organization is very different. When we consult, to be perfectly candid with you, I'll also tell you that not every organization is a great candidate for CPQ, right? So you've got to determine, based on what I said, does it take time and expertise to do configuration to create a quote for your customer? If it does, you're probably a great candidate for CPQ. But if you're mostly just order takers and the customer calls you and says, I want, item A, B, and C, and there's no rules around helping to advise them around which one's the right one, maybe not so much, right? So there's different business models here. I'm assuming you're here, so there's probably even potential interest in this. But here's the things that you can help to start to calculate your ROI from. So we talked about these on the last slide. The first one is time savings. You see that in the first row up there. And you can kind of see what we did was we said, okay, well, let's take some core values and assumptions here. And I took a very small business approach with small size products here. This might look very different for you. But you can see I said, okay, well, let's assume our company has about 50 quotes we're doing per month. And the average value of a quote is about $21.75 per quote that we're doing. Then we have some benchmark statistics. Benchmark means what's our current state? How is it working right now? So it takes us about 15 hours to do a quote. And we have to do a QA for our quote to make sure it meets all of our quality standards, no errors in it. Maybe that's passing it around internally for someone to read it. Looks different for every organization. So we said, okay, about 2 hours to do that. And we get about a 33% win rate, and we get about a 20% margin on those. Now this scenario, this top row, is focused just on time savings. Like I said, you can do multiple things if you want to. So we're gonna say, we think we can drive 5 hours out of that time to quote. So about a third reduction in the total time that we're spending per quote to create a quote. We're also going to cut the time to QA that quote by 50% from 2 hours to 1 hour. Now, this is about time savings, so we're not going to play with our win rate or our margins at this point. So we're going to look at that and say we're saving a total over the course of a year. We're going to save a total of 3,600 hours producing our quotes. Now, you can translate that a lot of ways. You can calculate the average cost of an employee and say what's the real cost for that. You can look at that as saying, well, now I've actually released 3,600 hours is almost the equivalent of 2 full-time employees. In fact, when you discount it for vacation and all that kind of stuff, it probably is the equivalent. A typical employee, if they work every hour of every year with no vacation, is 2,080 hours. So about 4,000 hours is about 2 employees. But then you take out at least a couple hundred hours for training and paid time off and all that kind of stuff. So you're almost recovering 2 full-time employees worth of time with a relatively modest amount of time captured for a relatively small amount of quotes. If you've got more quotes that take more time, you're going to get benefit there. What do you do with that time? Well, maybe you unleash your salespeople to sell more. Maybe you're unleashing your engineering people to innovate more. Maybe you're unleashing your customer service people to provide better customer service. Maybe you're just slowing down the rate at which you're hiring so that you can do the same amount of business, but with a lower amount of overhead as you continue to grow. That's up to you, but that's how that calculation works out. The next row down, we're going to look at margin. So same kind of current situation, 50 hours per quote, 50 quotes per month, $21.75 value per quote. Our benchmark in this case is the same. Won't read those numbers to you again, but our targets change. We're not playing with hours to develop a quote, so we're leaving that at the original level, 15 to develop the quote, 2 to QA the quote. We're not changing our win rate at this point, so still a third of our quotes get 1. What we are changing is our margin. So we're getting a pretty big boost in margin. We're going from 20 to 25%, right? That's about a 20%-ish increase in what our margins are overall. Maybe that's a little bit optimistic, so you can play around with that number a little bit if you want to. But based on those, again, relatively modest numbers around numbers of quotes and size of quotes and stuff, what we're looking at is about a $21,000 boost in revenue per year. So is that enough to completely offset the cost of CPQ? Maybe not, depending on how complex yours is, but maybe you can get a lot more benefit, or maybe you can enjoy some of these other benefits. So you need to go through the calculations to understand. But that's another angle. And then the last one is, so what if we change our win rate? All the other things are the same, except now we're taking our win rate from 33% to 45% to do this. So we're actually going to close 72 additional sales for a total of $31,324 in incremental revenue as a result. And if you look at the bottom and say, so what if we could accomplish all of those things? Well, we're going to get 3,600 hours back that we can do something with. We're going to have 72 new deals that we've closed. And we're going to have a total of $52,860 in incremental revenue, whether we're realizing that through improved margins, lower costs, or through additional deals that we've won. So that's a very high level. Again, I've tried to take super low level, small business numbers so that you can look at this if you don't want to do the work yourself and go, wow, we're probably a little bit different than this. Most of you would probably say larger and can have a bigger impact. But if you'd like to do the work for yourself, again, I'll give you the spreadsheet. If you know much about finance, this is not a rocket science spreadsheet for you to develop yourself, but I'll give it to you as a template if you'd like to have it. So this actually this quote comes from a group called the Aberdeen Group. If you're not familiar with Aberdeen, Aberdeen is one of those technology research companies that's trying to constantly do objective-based research to make recommendations to their clients around what technology investments make the most sense. So if you've ever heard of Gartner or folks like that, Aberdeen is kind of a similar business to them. And what they said is, best-in-class CPQs is experiencing 50% greater year-over-year growth in profit margins. So just a little bit of backup to say, I know some of those numbers I shared with you, you might have said, well, maybe going from 15 to 10 is a little optimistic, and maybe going from a 20 to 25% margin or a 33 to 45% win rate is a little overly optimistic. And you might be right, but Aberdeen would seem to suggest that you can get a pretty good return on your investment, perhaps even better than what I've outlined in that particular spreadsheet. So I'm going to open it up to questions here in just a second. Elizabeth's probably looking at any. I know she had a few that she wanted to ask as well, but a few other wrap-up things here while we're doing questions. I'll leave this slide here the whole time. First of all, there's my contact information. So if you want to contact me directly because you want anything that I shared, obviously reach out and ask for it. If there's questions you have that you want to just ask me, obviously reach out and share. There's Cincom's contact information at the top. If you want to go directly to Cincom to talk to them more about their particular CPQ solution, I invite you to do that. You can, of course, reach out directly to Elizabeth, but that's their general marketing email address, and you can, of course, find their website, fill out a contact us form, or call them if you'd like to. I already mentioned the ROI calculator. And the last thing I'd say is this is the business that C5 Insight is in. So whether you're looking at CPQ and trying to evaluate it more closely, or whether you're looking at a Dynamics implementation, or Power Platform, or SharePoint and Teams, or you're dealing with struggles and issues, trying to get something fixed on those things, that is our core business. We'd be delighted to talk to you about it. Thanks for coming. And Elizabeth, do you want to ask any questions at this point?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. Why don't I look at my list here? I think we just have a few. The first I have is from someone in the chat. My company doesn't have baseline numbers to compare against for calculating the potential ROI of a CPQ solution. So what do you suggest, Jeff?
Yeah, so a couple things. The first thing is that would suggest to me that you probably don't even have a reasonable CRM solution up and running. And a CRM solution is not an absolute prerequisite to a CPQ solution, but it's hard to get full value out of CPQ if you don't have CRM. Usually the two kind of go hand in glove. So if you do have a CRM solution and you don't have those baselines yet, you're probably very close to being able to have them. So it might just be refining your CRM, either gathering a little information you're not gathering, or even just doing the reporting you need to be able to suss the baseline numbers out of that. Even if you don't have a CRM at all and you don't want to go to that investment yet, the baseline numbers I gave you here are not that challenging. You might be able to go to your ERP system. Some people are doing quotes directly out of ERP, or you might be able to stand up some Excel spreadsheets and say, look, we're going to do this for 2 or 3 months together to gather these baseline numbers. All of those are possible approaches to doing this. I really think this bears out doing this in this particular case because getting those baseline numbers is not rocket science. However, if you find that that's too daunting to do, you can estimate your baseline numbers. A lot of times when we first set up dynamic processes and for sales and dynamics, an organization doesn't know what its close rate is, particularly how it varies by stage and stuff like that. So we make some educated guesses. So what we do when we're asked to make educated guesses is we try to make them interview enough to go, these are pretty educated guesses. And then we actually try to have a base sheet where we say, here's our educated guesses, and here's our risk adjustment on those guesses to say, if we're wrong, we're reducing this. We're making it more pessimistic with this reduction, right? We're going to reduce this estimate by 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever you think it's going to do to get you within the margin of error to get it accurate. And the reason I suggest that to you is A, you can play around with it a little bit to see, how much do we need to adjust it to make this still be a payoff for us. But the other reason I suggest it is when you bring this to the folks who are going to need to approve this budget, oftentimes they're going to look at this and they might look at what I just put in front of you in that spreadsheet and go, those numbers are way too optimistic and that's not how it works here, whatever those things are. They may be right or wrong about that. But if you have risk adjusted those numbers down, it makes it a lot easier to go, look, we're pretty sure we're doing 200 quotes per month right now, but we've adjusted this down to 100 just to be absolutely certain that we're right. And then it's harder to argue against it, right? You're basically saying, this is a pretty pessimistic view of the value we think we're going to get out of this investment before you make the investment. That's my preference on how I'd like to see that stuff done. Great question. I'm sorry, it's a little more subtle than just a quick answer, but hopefully that helps.
Okay, thank you. Here I have another one. We aren't certain that a CPQ solution is the right option for our organization. Other than ROI, is there anything else you would suggest?
There's a lot of things to look at when you do this. So I think I'm a big fan of ROI for CPQ because I think it lends itself so clearly to doing that, right? CRM is so big, sometimes it's a little harder to get your hands around that. CPQ is pretty granular in the benefits it brings to you as a company. So I very much encourage you to say, don't walk away from ROI. Maybe it's not your whole answer, but it's probably a little part of your answer. Other things you can do though is get a demo. Anybody's willing to give you a demo to kind of say, well, if you're not sure what CPQ is, if you're not sure how it works, get a demo. It might not be a perfect match for how you work, so it might require a little imagination, but at least if you're not sure if it's right for your organization, that probably has something to do with we don't quite have our heads around what this can actually do for us. So get the demo. And then the next thing to do is if you think, the ROI looks like it might work, the demo looks attractive to us, then do a pilot, do a prototype first, right? You don't have to go buy licenses for everybody and configure every single product in your product catalog to work in the CPQ solution to then determine if it works. Take baby steps into it. So make a small investment, get a few people licensed on it, get a few of your products in there, work through the process with them, see how that works for you, and continue to expand your investment from there, right? Do small bite-sized chunks.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Let's see. What are the differences between CPQ solutions? Oh, that's a good one. Jeff, what would you say to that?
So great question. And first of all, I don't want to pretend that I'm a depth expert on really any CPQ solution, right? I kind of think more from the business, and we have some of our people do some of the hands-on work with it. And candidly, we know more about Cincom than we do about Cincom CPQ Sync solution than we do about many others. But what I can tell you from my experience is 3 things always jump out to me, and that is how long have they been doing it, right? So there's a lot of companies that are somewhere between new and 10 or 15 years old who are doing things that maybe have great user interfaces and know how to generate a lot of marketing excitement and hype. But for things like this, experience is absolutely the leader, right? So I'm trying to think of something Microsoft recently announced that I had this conversation with, and I know what it was. It's channel integration. So Microsoft in particular has released a product around channel integration, and it's a fit for some folks. But when you think about channel integration, text messaging, phone, integrating all of that with CRM, social channel integration, all of that stuff, I am sure Microsoft will eventually have an amazing product. But what I can tell you is their product is new, and the people who've been doing it for 20, 30 years, their products are so much more mature. They were building this before there was even a Dynamics product line from Microsoft. So they have all sorts of call routing and intelligence and stuff like that that's going to take a long time for Microsoft to catch up with. So Microsoft doesn't have a CPQ solution, but there's a lot of providers out there who are younger organizations that are in generation 2 or 3 of their thinking around CPQ. So the first thing I'd look for in that is, are you dealing with a CPQ organization that has been around for 20, 30 plus years doing CPQ? Because it really has been around that long and even longer as a practice, and you want to draw on that experience. The other thing I'd say is support. It seems kind of, banal, I guess. I mean, of course, everyone should provide great support, but they don't. What I find is a lot of technology companies that are selling CPQ-like solutions, they are really in the business of selling licenses, right? They build technology, they sell the licenses for technology, and they don't really want to be in the support business, right? That's a cost center to them. So you want to find someone who looks at that and says, we're really serious, we have a great track record and excellent customer references about support, and they probably have a great partner channel. And I say that sounds kind of self-serving, but that's why we're a partner. We think it's an important part of this. Do they have a good partner channel and partners you can draw on when you need support also? When it comes to Dynamics in particular, one of the things I like to see with providers is they don't go, oh, we have this separate solution and we've integrated it with Dynamics, right? So let me give you an unbiased, totally separate answer to the question, just as an example. So HubSpot, if you've ever heard of HubSpot, HubSpot is arguably the best marketing automation platform out there right now. It's very, very good. It's very mature. Lots of users love it. It's an excellent platform. And you can integrate HubSpot with Dynamics. But I can't tell you how often we have replaced HubSpot with something like Click Dimensions or Dynamics 365 for marketing, because they aren't a separate solution integrated with Dynamics. They are built in the Microsoft Dynamics framework. They're using tables that are part of the Dataverse, the backend database, and all of that. That might seem like it's not a big deal, but for whatever reason, integration breaks down all the time. Those providers almost never do a complete and full job of integrating their solution with the backend of Microsoft Dynamics. So fixing breakages or doing your own integration or slogging data back and forth suddenly becomes a significant time consumer for you or your partner organization if the solution is a separate solution that is then later integrated with one or more CRM solutions. So I'd look for one that you say, this is actually built on the bones of Dynamics and uses the Dataverse to get its job done. It's familiar to my users and it's not integrated, it's just an extension of the solution. There's a lot more to it than that. You can go through big side-by-side comparisons, but if I were to kind of go through my top 3 things and give you a checklist, I would say that's the list.
Thanks, Jeff. Those are my top 3 questions for today. I mean, I think we're done, and I got so much out of this, Jeff. Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, Elizabeth and Cincom, for co-sponsoring this with us, and thanks today for our attendees. And this will be recorded, so if you're watching this recorded, thanks for watching the recording. All the things I said to the attendees go for you as well. Please reach out if we can do anything for you at all. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a great day, and I hope to hear from some of you real soon. Bye-bye.